Empire War Expanded Thrawn's Revenge 3.2 has released. This massive update includes new factions, new units, new heroes, completely overhauled gameplay systems, and complete overhauls to several existing factions rosters. In this video, we'll be going over the biggest changes in the release and some of the goals with them, while a more exhaustive list of changes or new content will be available linked in the description, on the workshop page, as well as on the Discord, both of which will be linked in the description as well. You can download the mod by subscribing on the Steam workshop, and if you're already subscribed on the workshop, you'll be automatically updated to the new version. As with any major updates, saves from prior versions will not work in the new update, though you will be able to use the backed up version from Mod Database to continue old saves. Rather than list out every individual new unit, since there are around 100, we'll cover the broader changes on a per faction basis. First, we have an entirely new playable faction, the Hapes Consortium, which are being upgraded from their formerly inactive and unplayable status. In space, the Hapens rely on a full roster of powerful frigates and cruisers, centered on the iconic Battle Dragon and Nova Cruiser. Even their largest ships are still considerably smaller than Star Destroyers, though they're all quite powerful for their size and fill a variety of roles within those size classes, making them also benefit significantly more from fleet tenders than other factions. They use a series of new designs developed by Valerie and Acertzel to fill in the gaps and flesh out the faction to be on the same level as the others. Larger ships can also be acquired by boarding enemy ships in battle, a mechanic which has received a few quality of life changes and bug fixes for all factions who use it. Units are now invulnerable while being targeted with boarding, and immediately retreat on a successful boarding action. A bug where you were previously unable to capture ships that are the same type as a ship already in your fleet has also been fixed. Hapen defenses range from the small Meridian 1 to the powerful Aphelion as their level 5 station, and unlike other factions, as a turtling and defensively oriented faction, they're able to build higher level secondary defensive stations than other factions in most situations. On the ground, they rely on a variety of infantry types supported by a core of highly mobile repulsor craft. The Hapen government mechanics are based on their Royal House system, where each Royal House has its own shipyard and building type. Building on a planet with a particular family structure gives you favor with them, which allows the recruitment of a minor hero, with further content connected to that coming in the future, and each Royal House government building gives a unique infantry company with a unique role connected to that house. On top of the entirely new Hapens, all of the Imperial Warlords have received overhauls of their own. In prior versions, while there were some unique elements to each one, they largely did feel like the same factions. In Point 2, each of them have received a new, more focused roster, with a clear gameplay style and a huge variety of new units to reinforce those, while keeping overlap in units as minimal as possible, pulling from a wide range of sources covering units that are not often seen, and giving us an opportunity to bring a spotlight to some more things people may not be familiar with. The Ariado Authority focuses on large dreadnoughts and battlecruisers, including the Bellator, Praetor, and the brand new Assertor and Torpedosphere, with their frigate and corvette roster being relatively support-oriented. They do have powerful fighters, but with their limited corvettes, their fighters are typically found on defensive duty rather than being used offensively. On the ground, slow heavy vehicles like AT-ATs make up the core of their forces, while supported by other repulsor tanks like the 1H, 1L, and 1M Imperial-class repulsor tanks. The Greater Maldrude has a core of powerful frigates with more defensively or utility-oriented capitals. Their only battlecruiser, aside from the Bellator at the Dreadnought level, is the Altor Fleet Tender, which is able to keep their fleets of smaller ships like broadsides, vigils, and strike cruisers operational longer, while not being especially heavily armed itself. They also have very limited access to carriers. On the ground, they primarily use hard-hitting mobile repulsors and aerial units to hit and fade across the map, with infantry like jump troopers from field bases backing up their mobile forces and heavy recovery vehicles serving almost as a mobile base to repair their tanks and gunships after their quick strikes. The Pentastar alignment is a dedicated carrier faction, built around ships like the Secutor, which has received a new model and texture, the Venator, and the new Praetor carrier. They have a carrier basically at every tier, while also having options like the Enforcer to hunt down enemy corvettes and protect their fighters. This works especially well with the new bomber setup that we'll talk about in a moment. On the ground, their infantry is used primarily to support heavy vehicles like the C-10 siege platform, though their field bases do provide access to some higher tier specialized infantry types. Warlord Zinj's empire has a focus on versatile corvette types, partially from his pirate connections, which work in tandem with larger, offensively oriented or experimental capital ships like the Aggressor-class Star Destroyer. On the ground, the faction is very infantry-focused, with the powerful and versatile Raptor troopers able to fill almost any role. His vehicle types are then used to protect or support infantry, including several infantry transports and even the A9 floating fortress, which is able to heal infantry on the go. The Empire itself has received a few changes, like the new dwarf spider droid, though fewer direct ones than the other warlords, as it's intended to remain something of a more generalist and beginner-friendly faction. There will be more changes to them in the .3 release though. This should all make every Imperial faction feel unique not only compared to each other, but to other factions in the mod. Hopefully this will mean each player has at least a few factions which appeal to how they want to play. Beyond these roster changes, the Empire and all Warlord factions have received an all-new, interconnected government mechanic called Legitimacy. Legitimacy is meant to reflect how much of a claim each Imperial faction has to being the true successor of Palpatine. Taking planets, especially planets like Coruscant and Kuat with historic importance to the Empire, will raise this value, while losing planets or having heroes be killed will lower it. Anytime an Imperial faction gains legitimacy, there's a chance that a smaller warlord group will petition to join your empire, allowing them to be recruited from your political options menu. These are usually a group of heroes with a variety of buffs and flagships, but can even include new unit types like the Storm Commando and the Imperial Escort Carrier or the TOG Battlecruiser. The highest tier unlocks can include unique hero SSDs, which you can receive one of per game. When an Imperial faction is reduced to 3 or fewer planets, a value which can change based on the specific map, if they don't still control a Super Star Destroyer or have their faction leader alive, then all of their remaining heroes, planets, and units will join the highest legitimacy Imperial faction, unifying the Empire as the game progresses and giving Imperial players something more to work towards and factor in as they plan their conquests. Integrating the Greater Maldrude will additionally give access to the Crimson Command Victory Destroyers, while integrating the Empire itself allows other warlords to begin producing Stormtroopers. To see map-specific integration information, which groups are available, and even which smaller groups have already joined your or other factions at any time, you can check the government overview display found on the left side of the galactic map. The Corporate Sector Authority has received its own new government mechanic as well, the Ship Market. The Ship Market is a second shipyard type which allows access to a pool of units which will become available in different amounts as the game progresses. These range from small corvettes like the CR-90, the Lancer, and the Crusader, all the way up to the powerful Mandator II Dreadnought. Every week there's a chance for each possible ship type to become available on the market, and if it does, you'll be able to build that ship at any ship market structure. Ships remain on the market until built, and several can become available at once. To see which types can become available, the chances of availability, and what is available at any time, you can check the government overview window at the left side of the screen, much like with Legitimacy when playing as the Empire. The New Republic and Empire of the Hand have received less attention this release, but some changes have occurred for both on top of the more systemic changes we're going to talk about in a moment for the mod. For the Empire of the Hand, while we're still planning a full rework to their ground rosters, there have been some holdover quality of life changes to help them be a bit less annoying to fight both as and against on the ground in particular, along with new models for their Brask and Visvia stations. For the New Republic, the AI will now elect different chiefs of state who are not just Mon Mothma, along with a few other changes like the new H-Wing Heavy Bomber. The New Republic, Empire of the Hand, and Empire will receive more focus in the .3 release. On top of these changes to the rosters and other changes to unit visuals, which there are several of, there are some changes to some underlying systems which will be familiar to anyone who's already played Fall of the Republic .2. In space combat, the way fighters, bombers, and anti-fighter corvettes are balanced has been completely overhauled. Generally, while spamming bombers could do a lot of damage over a long period of time, despite how hard they would be to kill, they tended to not feel especially interactive, and in most fleets with reasonable number of carriers, they couldn't be more than a small support element. So we set out to change that this version and make more varieties of fleet loadouts, including harder carrier focuses, more viable. Bombers have now been given two different types of more impactful ordnance: proton bombs and proton rockets, while standard proton torpedoes remain on mixed fighter bombers like X-Wings to make sure they still have some anti-capital damage, but don't interact with this new system as much. These new bombs hit very hard, especially on larger targets, but more methods are in to counter bombers as well. They're much less effective on smaller targets than bigger ones, partially because of accuracy, though they do have an area of effect damage splash, so clustered hardpoints can go down more easily. Bombers and fighters also die more easily when not supported, and most importantly, any ship with the the rapid-fire laser weapon type now has innate point defense, which will shoot down incoming munitions from both bombers and other capital ships. The loadout of all capital ships has been similarly retooled, with anything classified as a carrier being the only place to get dedicated bombers, but with the carrier role ships having far higher proportions of their loadout being those bombers, usually a 50-50 split with fighters. If you want to use a bomber-focused fleet composition, the tools to do so will be much more obvious and viable without frying your CPU, while other types of fleets will all have a lot more clear use cases, strengths, and weaknesses. To help accomplish this, weapon ranges and accuracy values have all been completely recalculated as well, with more emphasis being put on specific weapon types than on the tier being assigned to the unit itself how we used to do it. Light weapons will always be more accurate against smaller targets, but shorter range, whereas heavier weapons are longer range and less able to hit small targets. On top of general gameplay benefits, this should help give players a better idea of what each ship is best used for. With the changes to the AI, and changes to make pathfinding err on the side of overlapping rather than being annoyingly spread out, which helps the AI group far more successfully as well, exercising proper positioning and making proper fleet compositions for what you're going to fight will be much more rewarded than before. The AI should also build more balanced fleets for both space and ground attacks. We found a few factors like code and tech level that seem to have made the AI strongly prefer certain unit types and leveled them off among all units, along with making sure AI attack fleets don't include more than 2 battlecruiser type ships, like Praetors. There will always be a bit of weirdness to how the AI chooses to build, but composition should make far more sense than in the past. Superships, including regular ones like the Executor and Viscount class, and even Hero SSD units, can't as reliably be used to roll over the opposition with no downtime, even aside from increased vulnerability to bombers and other systems we've already spoken about. In point 2, if a supership gets damaged and the hull health drops below 90% of its total, that damage will still apply in the next battle. Every week, 10% of the health that was lost in prior battles will automatically replenish at the cost of 5% of the ship's original construction price, as long as you can afford that. The damage level of your superships can be seen at any time by checking the Galactic Stats tab on the left side of the screen. Basically, this means if you are heavily relying on superships, which used to mean if you left a battle with 1 hardpoint left, you could immediately reuse it in another battle with no downsides, you will have to take some time to repair, allowing the enemy to build up and respond, in the same way that you would have to if you were using another type of ship and lost the majority of the power from that fleet. Overall, these changes to space have resulted in significant improvements for how both the player and the AI should expect to have their fleets composed and how they use them in battle, reinforcing the goals we had when reworking the Imperial rosters as well. On the ground level, major changes have been significantly more targeted. Planetary shields and ground-to-space weapons being able to prevent bombing runs and orbital bombardments have helped remove the ability to just sit back and wait at a landing pad and instead become a goal to achieve in the battle by knocking out those targets over the last release, but we've also made some specific AI adjustments to help the flow of ground battles. The AI will now spend the setup phase of a battle trying to take different points of interest, for example different spread out landing zones and field bases, to establish themselves rather than simply hunting down the player, meaning they're not going to just rush your landing zone individually and then die on the way, making proactivity more important and making grouped engagements more common. Evil Bob the Bob has also made the AI more prone to retreat when a battle is clearly over, rather than wasting time having you hunt down a garrisonless building or a stray infantry squad somewhere on the map, further improving battle pacing. Additional documentation has been done within the land battles for some of the secondary objectives, like shields and victory points to help clarify them, and several new types of capturable structures have been implemented for extra variety on some maps. We've also begun a concentrated effort to improve a lot of the ground maps while introducing some new ones like the Megiddo map, which will be ongoing over at least the next release cycle, removing some of the older or messier ones and trying to emphasize what makes each feel unique or fun, but most importantly eliminating elements that can make ground battles in Empire at War feel like a slog or tedious. On the galactic side, we've begun some significant changes to the economy. Income levels for all planets have been recalculated as the baseline for your economy rather than the structures, with economic structures being split into trade ports, mines, and tax agencies for everyone, giving different bonuses and downsides rather than just being factional reskins of each other. Mines give flat credits where they're available, tax agencies decrease influence while doubling base planetary income, and trade ports give additional credits based on how many friendly planets are connected. Resources, rather than decreasing influence, now give negatives to build cost and build speed when in a deficit, making it both more forgiving for new players in particular because your entire faction won't start revolting, and also giving us more levers to balance it around. It should generally all help with a feeling of progression, much like with the ground changes, and add more considerations to the risk versus reward analysis of when, how, and where you expand. By giving the player a bit more to think about on the galactic level, it also helps allow the AI time to plan and make its own fleets. A few extra seconds between each battle on the galactic map spread throughout the entire game can mean a lot more of the bigger, more fun engagements that you're playing the game for. All of this should also help in setting us up for a bigger focus in the 0.3 release on the galactic maps and hooks to link story elements into. This is, again, far from an exhaustive list of changes, so check out the patch notes for a more detailed breakdown of what's new in this release. On top of this overview, I will be putting out a few videos giving faction overviews and strategy guides for new players especially, which I've already done for the CIS and Republic and Fall of the Republic. So if you find yourself with any questions about the mod, please give those a look when they're posted or check out our Discord linked in the description, where active members can already see some of what's underway for the 0.3 releases and is where we run testing of for future versions. Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoy the 0.2 release of Thrawn's Revenge.